Welcome to the Valor Fire Training Podcast. We're glad you're here because this podcast is designed for you, the fire service community, to learn about tactics, training, and culture. In each episode, we'll sit down with influential firefighters to discuss hot topics and current events. Before we dive in, remember that you can find entertaining video versions of each episode along with more on our YouTube channel. Just search Valor Fire Training, subscribe, and hit the notification button to be alerted when new content is added. And now, here's your host, Dave Mellon. What is up, everybody? This is Dave Mellon with Valor Fire Training. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to do another podcast, and I'm joined by David Hesselmeyer. How's it going, dude?
Brother, it's going awesome. Thank you. Hope you are.
Yeah, no, I'm great, man. I know you and I have known each other for a while. This has been on the books for quite a while. It's been one of those things that we've been trying to get set up scheduling wise, which seems to be a reoccurring theme. You know, it's one of those things. I mean, we're all busy people, so it's hard to get that stuff set up.
Yeah, and then, you know, I think for some reason COVID just made everything faster paced, even worse than what we were doing. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I did get to run into you at FDIC this year. We were walking down the hallway and it was kind of like, hey, I know you. And got to spend a couple seconds together. So that was cool. And you've been kind of teaching on the circuit. You've been doing a lot of great things. There's actually a lot of people don't know that there is more. You're very big into grant writing. That's your thing. But you also do way more than that. So why don't you kind of introduce yourself, talk about what you do and what you're passionate about.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, like I said, my name is David Hesselmeyer. I am a firefighter paramedic in North Carolina at a department called Bush Creek Fire Rescue. We are about 35 miles southeast of Raleigh, pretty much between Raleigh and Fayetteville. We serve a pretty decent area. We are also the county special technical rescue team for everything from swift water to high angle, low angle, those kind of things. I've been in the emergency services since 1997 and have enjoyed every day of it. Back in 2011, I was given a crazy honor to create a company called On Target Preparedness. We are an emergency services consulting firm. So we work with everybody from fire departments, emergency management, police, EMS, just anybody who wants to prepare and respond to disasters. And so we do everything from building exercises, doing trainings, just a little bit of everything. One of the things I'm working on right now is with one of our county emergency management agencies, we're building an exercise, a full-scale exercise where we're going to have a Cessna prop set up, and we're going to have a Cessna crop duster crash, and there's going to be leaking herbicide everywhere. And so we're going to see how they do, and hopefully through that training, they will find some things they're really good at and hopefully find some things we can improve on. So pretty much emergency services has been my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's awesome, man. And I know a lot of the stuff that you and I had talked about in the beginning was the realism in training. You know, making sure that the training and the scenarios that you're doing are as realistic as possible. And so when you sat down with me and we kind of compared notes, it was hilarious because we were on the same page about everything. I'm like, well, if you're doing an airplane down, get a plane fuselage. If you're doing, you know, a tank that fell over onto somebody, take a mannequin and put a tank on top of it.
Absolutely. So, yeah. That was the first thing when we got this award for this contract to do it. You know, we got around with some people and we found actually a lightly crashed Cessna that is not able to fly anymore. And that's what it's going to be. And we're going to put a mannequin inside of it. We're going to see one of the things we're going to test out is can they, you know, I think we're all used to cutting cars and stuff, but how many of us have cut into a Cessna before? Yeah. And I know I haven't. I've, you know, never had the opportunity. So let's just see how it goes. And
sure. Well, and so I have actually, it's funny that you brought that up. So I have talked about it a few times. I've never made a class out of it or anything like that because it's just such a one-off thing. And it really was a great experience, but we did have a twin engine airplane down in my district. And it was a double fatality, but the amount of stuff that you have no idea about on airplanes. I mean, when the FAA and the NTSB investigators came in, they would take 1,000 pictures of a door and then say, okay, I want you to cut that hinge, that hinge. And if you put your spreader or your cutter on there and it wasn't where they wanted it, they'd do an all stop and they'd make you move stuff. And then after you remove the door, they'd take another 1,000 pictures. And you're like, what? It took us like 4.5 hours to get basically into where the crew compartment was, just because they were being so meticulous. And I understand why, but yeah, there's so many more things that go into it that people don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, we actually have they call it a jet port in our first due, and it's funny because we're 30 minutes from Fort Bragg, and we have helicopters from Fort Bragg come in and they just practice all the time, and that's something we try to do is sit down and train with them, and them to show us the helicopters, they pretty much are knowing that something's going to happen and they're going to be on the way very, very fast. We've seen that proven. But there's all kinds of markings and stuff that hey, look, if you see this specific marking, stay the mess away from that. And it's like we do with looking at threats and hazards. It's something that is not a high likelihood, but it could have a very high potential of impact. And so we, as I've always said, if somebody dials 911 and it's not medical and it's not breaking the law, well, guess what? We're going to be the ones tasked with doing it. So we got to have some idea of how and what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. So there's a couple different rabbit holes that we can go down, but the one that I really, and you and I had talked off camera before the show, and one of the things that I really wanted to touch on was the grant writing, because you're super passionate about that. But also one of the big ticket items that's going on right now in the fire service is recruitment and retention. And so I'm going to let you choose which one you want to start with. But those are the two that I was like, man, that'd be awesome to pick his brain and kind of dive in deeper. So which one do you want to start with?
Well, let's just go for grant writing. Let's get it started good. I mean, let's talk about finding money.
Gotcha. All right. So starting out with grant writing, one of the biggest questions that I get and I've always had throughout my career is that there are a plethora of different places to find funding. There's local grants, there's the AFG grants, there's SAFER grants. And so I have been a part of a few of the different types of grants. And I know that within them, there are subsections too, right? I mean, there's just so many different places. So how do you find a way to get grant funding, and what are the processes to go through? Because I think a lot of people just look at it as this overbearing beast, which it kind of is. So how do you do that? I mean, what's the beginning stages?
Well, it's funny you mention it, because that's actually the process is one of the first things when I teach at FDIC or places. The first thing we talk about is the process, is because it's so novel to us, and it's something we don't generally do that often, that it's different. So the first thing I always like to say is just learn the process, and there's plenty of information out there. I use a couple charts and graphs from UNC Chapel Hill that does a great job explaining it. But in essence, the first thing I always say is you have to find grants. You can't have one project in mind and then say, well, I'm gonna find a grant for it, because there's grants that may fit and you may be able to to match them together with a need, but it's so much easier to have a list of needs. So when a grant pops up, you can go to that list and say, okay, which one of these needs can we possibly write it for? So that's a big part of it. And then, just like I said, just going through the process of, building a budget, preparing a proper proposal that, of course, is edited and not thrown together, making sure you meet deadlines and things to that nature, and submitting it. Pay attention to details. I can't say this enough, when I teach my classes, is just pay attention to the smallest minute detail. I can tell you that we were awarded a grant one time, because we write grants my company write grants for all types of agencies, even outside emergency services. And we were awarded a mental health type grant for a public health department. And one of the comments that we got was, you paid attention to the details because we told you to staple the bottom right corner of the application packet, and so many people didn't do it that way. They just did the standard top left-hand corner type of thing. And then, following that up is just making sure you do it right. If you said that you're going to do A, B, and C, then do A, B, and C. If you don't get it, you're not awarded the grant, then try to find out, what do we think we did wrong? Did they give you feedback? And then you start the process over again. So I always say, in terms of finding grants, I think the first thing I would say is, don't limit yourself. I can't tell you how many, fire departments have came to me and said, well, we just can't find grants. And I start talking to them, and they're specifically looking for a grant that says fire departments can apply. And we're self-limiting what grants we can potentially get. One of the examples I use in my class is, there's a grant, there's many grants out there for this, but they'll sit there and list that if you're a 501c3, which is an IRS tax code lingo, that basically a nonprofit organization that is a community-based organization. Well, I don't know what other people consider fire departments, but I consider ours a community organization. It's not a stretch. I mean, our large training room is used from everything from the Kiwanis Club to Campbell University, a smaller university in our first due. Some of their clubs will have like a spaghetti fundraiser night. And so we've got to make sure that we have an open mind, to see what we can apply for. And you just then start building, a spreadsheet of grants, because so many of them, happen over and over. The Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation grant, they take, proposals every quarter. So that way you have it on the spreadsheet and you're looking at it. As you get, further and further down researching, I always say is, think about your first due area. What types of agencies do you have that you're going to be the first ones to pull up? So I know for my district, my department, we've got a Chick-fil-A, we've got a Moe's, we've got several types of gas stations. They have an vested interest in us because we're the ones that's going to come to their facility should something happen. So, it takes legwork. It's not something simple, but, you could simply just put in, go like, Chick-fil-A and grants and just see what pops up. And my experience has been about 95% of the time, you're going to see the first couple of things in your Google search engine results are going to be, Chick-fil-A, charitable giving, or Chick-fil-A grants available, or, those kind of things. And then you just spend time researching it. And again, then you just log it into your spreadsheet that these are available. And the other part that I highly recommend, and this is, again, something I'm very passionate about in my class, is that you're not going to be the first person that's ever written a grant for a fire department. And so I was honored to have about 100 people in my class at FDIC last month. And I told each one of them, I said, you need to leave out of this classroom with somebody else's business card or somebody else's contact information on your phone, because this is one of the ways that we can share. And, if I sit there and I'm going to write a grant to Firehouse Subs for, I always call it widget in my class, but just that next, thing that we need. Well, if somebody else has written a similar grant to Firehouse Subs and it was awarded, that's an amazing person that can give you a lot of information. So, those are some of the ways that you can, dive deep into, finding those. And that's what I do. I mean, I've got a list and, that I maintain and, for different agencies, fire departments and EMS and such. But, don't let yourself be bogged down by, well, there's just the SAFER grant and there's the AFG, but we really don't know. There's plenty of other grants. Just keep looking for them.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you bring that up because, we have Firehouse Subs here locally. And, we also have like the Royals, Kansas City Royals, Kansas City Chiefs. They have a public safety grant that they put out quite often. And so, yeah, it is nice to be able to find those local people that will help fund some of your special use projects. Now, a lot of times, and I've heard this too, there are departments that I've been involved in who have very small budgets. And then there's departments that have these huge budgets. And so it's funny to hear the difference between the two. Like when somebody's putting in for an AFG grant and they're a small volunteer department or a smaller combination department, they're like, oh, well, we're never going to get it because such and, XYZ full-time big city fire department's going to get all the money. Well, that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of places that are smaller that have smaller budgets that still get a tremendous amount of funding. And vice versa, there are bigger departments that, they'll put in for something that they think they're 100% guaranteed for and they don't get it. So where do you tell your clients, when you're talking about funding sources, where do you kind of put them as far as not getting their expectations up or building them up to think like, hey, I can put in for 80 grants a year and I might get 50% of them, which is better than nothing?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about is teaching people that you are not going to get every grant that you put in for. And I see so many people that become downtrodden or just down on themselves because, like, well, I put in 2 grants, we got turned down both times. And, I've been dealing with grants for, 20, 25 years, somewhere around in there. And I can tell you, I don't get every one of them. My personal belief is we've got to move the mindset of what is a successful grant from the idea of obtaining the grant to did we put in a solid proposal that was competitive, that we minimized all possibilities of mistakes and errors and followed directions. And if we can say, yes, we did, then we were successful. We did everything we can. And, as it relates to, the size department, those kind of characteristics used to apply more. Nowadays, what we're seeing with grant funding agencies is they want to see what is your need and why, and what is this money going to impact. I've worked with the fire department that I was on years ago. I think their budget was like about $45,000 a year, which I don't know how fire departments operate with that. That's pretty much why I became very passionate about these kind of things with writing grants and such. But, it's more about the need and the impact that their money can have on you. So, I think that where we have those smaller agencies and the bigger agencies that kind of go back and forth with what their thoughts are with that is we've got to focus on what do we need, explain the need. Why is this, come up? And then explain to them, well, you know what, if you fund this, these are some things that we believe are going to happen because of what you're providing for us. And I always say with statistics. We do things like collect data from NIFRs and, different departments and counties and other forms of departments have different data that they collect, use it. And I highly encourage, if your department's not collecting data right now, collect it. Start collecting it. Collect everything you can without, bogging yourself down. Because, one of the examples I love to give is, if we start seeing, let's say we look back and we're seeing a 3-year trend increase in structure fires. And then we dive down farther and go like, what are the causes of most of these? Well, 80% of them are cooking related. Well, that's some great data to then put in and say, you know what? Obviously, we have an issue right now going on with cooking related fires. So what we want to do is ask a grant funding agency, hey, can you give us $6,000 for this, public education campaign that we're building to try to get this information out to our citizens? And we're hoping that upon enacting it, we want to see a 5% decrease every year in fires instead of cooking related fires, instead of seeing that increase. So it's data is and statistics is where it's at.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so I'm going to dive down this rabbit hole because I was sitting there and I'm like, man, do I say something? Do I not say something? So I have had so many arguments over the years with company officers, chief officers, inspectors, investigators, where we're trying to capture data and they don't see the need in getting that data because for whatever reason it's not important to them. And the whole reason why I bring it up is because listen, if I'm going to put in for a grant and I want to know how many, you know, I'll use this as an example. We had a district intersection in our district that was horrible for injury accidents and severe injury accidents. And so, you know, how do we sit there and track how many vehicle accidents with extrication we have? Well, it's in your NFIRS report. But on the type of fire and the cause determination and all that stuff, people were just putting down undetermined, undetermined,
Mm-hmm.
undetermined.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer rats with matches. It's not an option in the NFIRS report. I'd love it to be, but they didn't see the need of putting down an actual cause. And so when we dove down into it, a lot of it was, you know, irresponsible smoking. There were a couple initiatives that we could have done very early on, but it wasn't until we started looking at some of that funding for those special use projects that we started going, hey, we don't have any data. We have no idea where our fires are coming from. So yeah, you brought up a huge point. I was like, oh my God, that's us to a T.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I could tell you, you know, with the investigators in my county, a lot of times, you know, they just get to the point of, well, you know, it was you know, something that naturally occurred. It wasn't arson. It was not any kind of criminal activity. All right, we're done. That's it. And like you said, it's like, but why? You know, there's very few times that fire just mysteriously just goes, I'm going to start,
Right.
and stuff. And so, you know, and that's it. And you know, and I'm very much a person that's not afraid of conflict with talking with others, with my passions and my beliefs. And, you know, and so I always tell, you know, fire departments when they kind of like, well, we don't need data, we don't like data. I'm like, you look at Fortune 500 companies that are making tons of money, millions, billions of dollars. What do they do the best? They collect data.
Yeah.
That's what they do. I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, On Target Preparedness is not a huge company. I mean, we've got 5 full timers and about 19 part timers, but we collect data. We collect data on, you know, how many proposals we submit, how many we're, you know, able to get. We look at our, you know, we compare the profit margins and say, well, you know what, we did an estimator on this proposal and we put in for, let's say, a 12% profit margin, you know, in our cost analysis, you know, and we didn't get it. But we did this one over here and it was 9%, and we got this one. Well, okay, so something's telling us stuff. I mean, legitimately, majority of what we need to know can be given to us by statistics. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times our departments, and Dave, I know y'all are probably the same way. You know, you have a bad incident, whether it's a car accident or where you got a working fire. A lot of times we'll have like an after action critique of it, you know, and we're going to try to fix the things. That's all that data does. That is just help us go like, okay, this is a problem. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been, you know, with fire departments and they're like, well, this is obviously the problem. And I go, okay. And I've got a funny little saying. I go, it's like, I'm Missouri. I'm the state of Missouri. I'm the show me state. So show it to me. Because again, you know, I can tell you I'm a billionaire, but you can't prove it by me sitting here. But now, if I sit there and showed you my checkbook, you're quickly going to go like, "Yeah, you're not a billionaire," and
Right.
stuff. And,
Right.
you know, and so that's what's going to make that difference. And I mean, why can't we use that stuff to get better? We have to.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I do have a question for you though on alternative funding, and I know you do a lot with grants, but this is a subject that comes up quite often that I get into discussions with people. And since you're very financially driven as far as that specific topic, how do you feel about how do I say this? There are billing opportunities for fire departments, right? So what I'm not talking about is, you know, billing for inspections, billing for illegal burns necessarily, but where I think people get really freaked out is like if your house is insured, most insurance companies have a $500 line item for a structure fire. If you don't take that money, if the fire department doesn't receive that money, it doesn't go to the homeowner. it stays with the insurance company. So my department at one time billed. We stopped doing it because there was some outcry from some neighboring departments, and they created kind of an issue for us. And so we stopped doing it, and now it's back on the table again, where we're discussing the opportunity for us to bill for those things. So where does that fit into like an alternative funding source? Because there are a lot of departments that have, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles of interstate. And a lot of the people that are utilizing their equipment or utilizing their resources are not paying taxes into the system. So what's your thoughts on that?
My belief is that, I had the pleasure of knowing, Chief Brunicini for the last little bit of his life. And, one of the things that, he always talks about, of course, is Mrs. Smith. How are we impacting Mrs. Smith? And, so my belief is kind of goes back to just like you said, brother, is that, the bottom line is the homeowner's not getting that $500 if you don't get. That's going to go back in the pocket of an insurance company that's going to put it into their profit margins. And I think we all know that they're making plenty of dollars from all of us. So my belief in a case like that is charging. I think there's reasons to do that. I'm also a fan of, it's kind of gone both ways for us here in my county, but also the issue of, billing for excessive fire alarms, and I mean, we've had 2 fire alarms this week at one facility, and both times it was, steam activated, and it's something that they should have known about. At some point we have to go like, okay, look, we're not going to keep putting people's lives at risk. And, especially, whether it's a career and the diesel fuel in in a fire engine or a ladder, or, gas in a volunteer's car, and keep coming up here and y'all just can't figure out that you don't put steam in there. So, or that you got to clear steam out as it's going, and stuff. So, I think that as long as what we're doing is not negatively impacting the citizens we serve, then I think we should do it. I mean, because it's like I say with grants. It's, people say, well, I don't want to take this grant because maybe my taxes will go up, or or maybe they'll go down if I don't. No, the bottom line is if you don't take grants and you don't use them, then basically somebody's going to, and so we've got to take advantage of what we get. I mean, again, the whole reason I got into grant funding was because I don't think any of our departments are funded probably 75% of what they should be. And so we've got to find that way. And in a case like you're mentioning, their insurance is not going to go up maybe a penny a month at best if we really, really, round it up, for that $500. I mean, it's probably more like, 1/1000th of a penny a month at best. So we're not hurting them for that.
Well, and I think too, and this is a great segue into this whole thing. Like when we did billing before, right? Our billing was set up, and there's a lot of different billing companies. We were using a nationwide one. But the way that we did billing is if they were a resident of our district and they paid taxes in, we billed the insurance company, whatever the normal rate is, right? And so we weren't going above that. We weren't going below it, but we would bill them that rate. And if the insurance company didn't pay it, the homeowner got nothing as far as like a bill. We didn't send them a bill. We didn't take them to collections. We didn't do any of that stuff. It was just, we billed the insurance company. If we got the money, great. If not, it was a write-off. If they didn't live in our district and they didn't pay taxes into our system, and we didn't receive money from them, then they would get a bill. If they're a resident of a neighboring department and their insurance company doesn't pay it, it's a write-off. So it wasn't like we were going after people. The only people that we would actively go after were people that didn't live in the county, who didn't pay taxes into some of the mutual aids or our department. And so, like a great example, we had we had a vehicle accident. It was the at-fault party who didn't live in our state, and it ended up being like a 5-car pileup, and we ended up using a bunch of foam and a bunch of resources, which cost us quite a bit of money. And so we billed the insurance company. The insurance company paid a portion of it, and I think the guy got a bill for like $150, and he wrote a check and sent it to us and said, "Here's $150 to make it even." So I don't know. Like I said, I know that's kind of a moral, ethical. There's people that stand on the podium of we're tax based and we already receive money from the taxpayers. I would say in the name of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's not fair for us to have to ask for more money from them because we're using more money on people that don't live in our city or don't live in our district.
Well, I can give you a situation that actually happened in my own fire district. Like I said, we've got Campbell University, in our first due. Well, they are growing bigger and bigger, constantly building 3, 4, soon to be even higher than that, facilities, and including, high residential dormitory apartments and such. And we started getting to points like we don't have a ladder truck, probably, within about 25 minutes emergency traffic of our facility, of our department. That's a pretty decent amount of time when you're talking about having, multi-story, dorm style, type buildings, commercial buildings. But at the same time, it was hard because Campbell is a private religious institution, and so they don't pay fire taxes to us.
Right.
And so we kind of, it was a moral and ethical dilemma. Do we take the money that, Mr. and Mrs. Smith are paying to us and buy a ladder truck, or how do we get something we need? And this was worked out. This is another way to do, another way to do funding sources. Is we went to Campbell and said, look, this is not going to help anybody really in our district but you. And, we need to come up with some way that we can make it fair to the taxpayers as well as, you, the college. And so, we sit down and over, 3-4 months of discussing and compromising that, we come up with a way where I can't remember exactly, but they were going to pay like a third or maybe a half of the ladder truck for us. And then we were able to go to our taxpayers and go like, look, we know this is not in average, it's not going to sit there and help you. We still roll it to, different places depending on what their structure is, but it's mainly going to help Campbell. And what did our, taxpayers said? Well, you know what? Campbell's part of the community. We need to protect Campbell. But I think part of that was because, we went and said, hey, Campbell, we can't justify charging them, because I think our ladder truck was around $1.3 million.
Right.
I can't go to Campbell and say, we want you to buy it all, because that's going to turn them off, because they're like, no, we ain't paying over $1 million for something that we're not going to own or something to that effect. Sure. And we couldn't ask the citizens. And so, it worked out. And, we made Campbell a little bit happy because of the fact that we have been historically, until that day that we received this truck, our paint scheme was always white over red on all of our trucks, no matter what it was, ambulances or whatever, because we run EMS as well. And Campbell are the Campbell Fighting Camels. And so we painted with their colors, with black and orange. So we have a huge black and orange 105-foot pierced tower ladder. And, honestly, it's kind of brought us closer because, every parade Campbell has, guess what they want in the parade? Yep. It's a fight with all the teams and the cheerleaders for the parades. Who's going to ride the ladder truck? Right. And parents, it's gotten to the point now where when we know it's move-in weekend, we go ahead and put people down at the station, specifically for the purpose of just showing that truck off. Yeah. And so it's been mutually beneficial. It's just, and it didn't hurt the taxpayers as hard, and it didn't hurt Campbell as hard. So that's, I think, the way, like you said, is, we're not going to sit there and go after our citizens, but, if the insurance pays it, great, but, there are times that we have to just go like, what, this is what has to be, because, again, I mean, diesel fuel, I know here in North Carolina is somewhere around $5-6 a gallon now.
Right.
That stuff doesn't last, very long when we're talking about trucks. And the fact that when we're working on fire, it's not like we can just turn our fire trucks off and go like, hey, we're going to save diesel fuel. No,
Right.
we need it because we got to pump it. We got to sit there and ladder it. We got stuff that's got to go. And so one good working job is going to sit there and possibly, take half a tank of diesel fuel in each vehicle. So,
Yeah.
we've got to be thinking about things in a 2022 version.
Yeah. Well, and that was the biggest thing is that, when we started looking into billing 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and then we did it for about 3 or 4 years. When we originally started looking into it, it was for that specific reason because we were running 80% medical calls and we were running as a first response. We don't transport, we don't bill for services. And we were ALS. So, we show up on a call, we're using IVs, we're given D10 or D50 at that time. So we're using all these resources, but we're not recouping anything. So, I go to the service area on the interstate and I take care of Joe from Oklahoma and give him a bunch of meds and start an IV and do all this stuff. It's not an exorbitant amount of money, but that's money that I'm not billing for. Well, then the ambulance comes and transports that patient and they make money off of them. And so whether it's cost neutral for the ambulance, it doesn't matter. They're still able to build or kind of recoup those costs. And so that was kind of what we talked about. The other thing that I love that you brought up is the fact that, if there's a specialized group, whether it's a business or a educational facility, I know in one of my districts we have a ton of companies that have ethyl methyl bad stuff. They are hazmat hubs, right? And so maybe going to them and saying, hey, we want to send a couple of people to hazmat tech school. We're going to fund that and we're going to pay them their salaries to go to that, but we need some help with the equipment. Can you help us buy some of our disposables? And so a lot of the companies I've dealt with before would be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example of groups like that. I mean, electrical companies, a lot of times, nuclear power plants, they're more than willing to support things. It's just you got to build that network and build that relationship. And I think that, like you said, you go into it like, hey, look, we're going to pay part of this, and if you don't mind helping us out with this, but we're just trying to get ready that if y'all go down, we're 110% ready that no matter what you throw at us, we're going to be able to have a plane, and we're going in, and we're going to be, protect your property and everything else and your people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's funny that you mentioned that. We were just having a discussion not too long ago. There's a company called Evergy here in Kansas that is our electric company. They have a trailer that has like 150 5-gallon buckets of the F500 or some sort of encapsulating foam, which is not cheap. I mean, you're talking $160 a bottle. And so when we got to talking to them about some other mutual aid type stuff, they're like, hey, man, if you guys need that, you just call us and we'll trailer it out there. And I said, for like electrical thing or like some sort of power plant related thing? They're like, no, it could be your deal. You call us and we'll bring it. That's us helping the community. We don't care. It doesn't have to be an Evergy problem. If you have a rollover on the interstate and there's ethyl methyl bad stuff and you got it on fire, call us, and if we can put our foam in use, we'll use it. And I was like, that's pretty cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much that these companies, when you build that relationship with them, that they realize that they can't do it without the community, and the community benefits from their being there. And so it's a win, again, it's a win-win. It's yeah, it may cost them a little bit of money, but in most businesses that size, them using a trailer load of that for the common good is not, going to hurt their pocket that bad. And then it makes it look good. And what does it do? It helps us do our job better. So, I mean, definitely jump on it. I mean, and that's, that's why I fully support, getting out and spending time in your district with the communities. We've got a emergency management agency that we work with every year to do some kind of exercise. And through doing all this, we found out that one of the largest glass manufacturers in the world is in little old North Carolina in a very smaller county. And since then, they have been on our side. They have supported us. In fact, we're looking at possibly doing a very large full-scale exercise next year with them just to really test. And they're, they're like, okay, how much money do we need to put in on it? How much, and it's like, I mean, this is how we win, right? I mean, it's like everybody comes together for the greater good. It's what FEMA calls the whole community, in planning and preparedness. Is when we all come together, we're going to be able to handle this a lot easier.
Oh, absolutely. So that kind of brings us into the next topic that we were going to talk about, recruitment and retention, right? So it doesn't matter how much funding you have. If you don't have people, you can't do anything. So I'm gonna be the first one to say it. I'll go ahead and drop on that sword. Recruitment and retention is a shit show right now. It's happening everywhere. We're having problems in volunteer agencies that I'm a part of. We're having problems in career departments that I'm a part of. Recruitment and retention is nothing like I have seen before.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but and the fire service as a whole, not career versus volunteer, but us as a whole, we have never really changed our process in how we're trying to get good people. In volunteers, volunteer departments, what do we do? It's maybe by word of mouth. Hey, if anybody needs to, feel the need to, volunteer and help, come over here. Or it's, we've got a little sign in the front and we put volunteers needed, and, we constantly lose letters from it because it's been up so long and such. And even with career, I mean, we put a little information out there and say apply and let's see what happens. And we've been in business too long now to have not made adjustments. If we're in a fire and we're doing something and it's not working, we're not going to keep doing that for the next 3 hours. We're going to change our tactics. So it's time that we look at it and go, what are we doing? What is working? What is not working? And make changes based on that. Our society has changed tremendously from, businesses not allowing their people to leave work to go to alarms and things like that, to people not wanting to waste their time on it, as they would say, and the same thing. I mean, with career side is people's like, well, I just need a job. So I just want a job. So I'm just going to put in for it and see what happens. And we won't, or at least I feel like that we want to be, an elite organization. We want the best of the best. And so we can't keep going like we did in 1985 and expect we're going to get the same results. I mean, even in the last 20 years when I teach about recruitment and retention, of course we've seen more women in the fire service. We've seen more fathers that are stay-at-home fathers and things like that. So our whole entire workforce has changed. And then, of course, COVID hit, and there's even more changes. And so we have to start diving down to that. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to do that. Some of it is just easy. One of the questions I always love departments when they ask me, hey, look, we just can't get good people and they're leaving and stuff. And so the first thing I ask them is, why are they leaving? Well, we don't know. Why didn't you? And so I tell them, I'm put an exit interview, situation in place. If somebody's going to leave, from your department, even volunteers, ask them for an exit interview. Hey, what did we do good? Hey, what did we do bad? Would you tell us why you're leaving? Was there some kind of situation? And then figure those things out. If we see the next 3 people that leave our department is because they're disgruntled, about, some nepotism and favoritism going on in the department, then, we're going to have to make the hard call of, are we going to sit there and keep up with doing those kind of favoritism type actions and risk more and more people leaving, or are we going to fix problems? And it could be that, things are happening that we don't even know are causing issues. Right. And so we've got to make some choices and some calls and doing some things different that we haven't done before.
So, and listen, man. So I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm getting worked up over this one, right? Like this is one of those topics that just grinds my gears, dude. And it is, as we're talking, and don't take this the wrong way, it's nothing on you, right? Like you didn't cause this problem, but damn it, this is one of those things that just pisses me off right now. And I've had so many discussions with people. So I want to hit a couple things because you mentioned some stuff and I want to hit it head on. So you talked about the way that we've hired people in the past and the way that we've done stuff in the past. I have seen so many organizations, and I'm talking departments with like 3, 4, 500 personnel, all the way up to 1,000 and all the way down to 20, that sit there and say, well, we're putting out positions and we're getting 1 applicant, we're getting 2 applicants. But then when you sit there and you talk to them and you say, hey, here's an idea, why don't you get on board with like 4 or 5 other departments in your area and do one hiring process, and then you can pick who you want. Because now you got all these different people that are applying for all these different departments, and they're going into a pool. So they can turn down that job. If they apply for XYZ fire department, okay, they might not get that job, but there's no guarantee that they're going to come apply for you. If they apply for a pool and they go in there and say, I'm applying for this collaborative, hiring process, they might get turned down by Department A, but Department B says, hey, we'll give you a job.
Well, that's the thing, because it's like, it's the way I look at it with on-target preparedness is, we want the right fit. And it doesn't mean that you're not the right person, but it just may be you're not the right fit overall. But like you said, Department B may be. But, there's so many aspects of that is valuable as, not with just find the right person, but then, you're possibly able to extend your reach, because maybe you only have $500 worth of funding a year to put out information. Right. Well, you know what? Let's say it costs $500 to put it in the newspaper, or however that they just, or sponsor it, and on Facebook or something, and stuff. Well, that $500 only goes so long. But now, if you got 3, 4, 5 departments in a generalized area, you're sitting there and able to go like, okay, well, maybe this is only costing me $100 and not $500, and go farther. And then I think that there's other tertiary effects from that, including, the fact that if you're using an agreed upon, series of, interviews and things like that, you're able to know that you're being more proper to the job and hiring in a proper fashion. Because if you're doing something that's questionable, it's going to be something that's going to come out in the wash together as you build that component, and everything. And, and one part I want to say, kind of a couple things here. Number one is, if you're a volunteer department and you're not interviewing applicants, you're messing up. It's time that we sit there, and I'm not saying we grill them, but we need to know the who, what, when, where, why that they're wanting to be on. We had a person one time in the department when I was an officer responsible for recruitment and retention, and we interviewed her and we said, why do you want to be on the fire department? She said, I want to see dead bodies. And we was like, no.
That's a really messed up answer.
Right. And to be that front,
that's not the answer you want to hear.
Right. Granted, she gave us, it was honest, it was upfront, it was not hesitant, but that's not what we want. That's not why we want people. So I think volunteer departments need to, and again, it does not have to be some kind of long 4-hour, but just get to know them. I know with our department now, if you join as a volunteer, we have to hold your application for 30 days before you are voted on to on your probationary period. Right. And the whole reason we do that is because we want to see how much you're going to come around. Are you going to come to training night? Are you going to come to business meeting night on Thursday nights and hang out with us and learn us and talk to us? And, if the answer is, you turn it in and 35 days later, we're going to vote on it, we haven't seen you again, you're probably not going to make it because you're not dedicated enough. And, with that aspect, and, when it comes to, the career side, one of the things that I'm preaching, right now in business as a whole, and it's definitely important in the fire services, we have to really look at our hiring process. And that's something that I've had to learn the hard way with my company. And, so long in business, we've had, well, let's do an hour interview. If we, then we'll pick somebody that we think's good. We've known each other for a while. I don't know everything about you. You don't know everything about me. I've got close friends of mine that are on the fire department that I've known for 25 years, that they don't know everything about me, and vice versa. So, that's when I can tell you my company went from being this, simplistic, 1-hour interview to where we made it into a 4-step process that involves, step one is very simply applying, us doing some, some resume checks and making sure that everything looks on the up and up. And then You do a what we call a pre-interview questionnaire where you have to follow directions and answer 3 questions in paragraph form. Then we have a virtual interview on like Zoom or something to see how you handle, being in front of us, with a few people in a virtual setting. And then you come in, if you make it to that far, you come in, you have to give a 10 to 15 minute presentation on something that a topic you're given, at least a week to prepare for. And then as part of that, then you go through the interview. But it's even more than that. I've got a 13-year-old daughter named Reagan. And in the email we send to the people coming to the in-person interview with presentation, we specifically state somebody will meet you at the front door with an on-target preparedness polo on that will guide you. Well, that tells me a lot that I need to know when you walk in, as we've had applicants do, and basically brush her aside. And she's got an OTP polo on. Yes, she's 13 years old, but you know what? If I put in my email as the head honcho, this, somebody like that's going to be there to direct you, and you didn't. And I had one person come in specifically and blew past her, walked in to where we were, discussing the previous, applicant, and just barged in. And, my daughter gave me the signal to come talk to her, and I did. She told me what he did, and then he was just kind of, that kind of, well, I'm coming in and taking control. And I said, sir, you pack your stuff up. You're no longer in consideration for this job.
Yeah.
And so that's the stuff we have to look at. And even on the career side, the standard, well, you do the physical agility test, and then you do an hour interview and stuff. And it goes back to even grant writing with the data. I mean, if we hope people want to move up, become lieutenants and captains and battalion chiefs and such. Well, if they can't write it all, they're not going to be doing very good, reporting and
right.
writing reports. So, we got to put some effort into this.
Yeah, well, and so God, you keep bringing up a bunch of great points, and it's fantastic, man. So, yes, okay, I want to touch on this real quick, and then I'm going to get back to the other things because we got way off down this rabbit hole. This is fantastic, dude, because this is one of those things that we could talk about for 4 hours, and I'm sure the listeners are like, no, you won't. But no, so there are departments that I've been involved with that you're right. They have these extraordinarily long, very meticulous hiring processes, and the data doesn't support a damn bit of it. You might get a really good candidate who interviews really well, and they pass that psych eval, and they pass the lie detector test, and they do all this stuff, and then they end up being a pedophile or a drug dealer. And so it's not, there are so many ways to get around that stuff. And so what I have found, and I guess my observation is, the more processes that we put people through, the less likely they're going to sit there and go, oh, so Department A hires really good firefighters, and I've gone and I've hung out with them and I've met them and I've done a ride along with them or whatever. And I really like that department, and they have pretty solid, employees, and they have a 4-step process. Or I can go apply for Department B that does a 25-step process, and their guys were kind of assholes to me.
Right.
Which one are you going to go apply for? Well, I'm going to go apply for the other one that doesn't do as much, but puts better people on their department. And so I understand it's a double-edged sword, because that's getting into department politics. It's also getting into government politics when you get into HR and some of the other things. And for career departments, there's union issues, right? How do they hire people? The process that they have to go through. But you are correct. The way that we've been hiring in 2002 is not the way that we should be doing it in 2022. And I find that there are a lot of departments that are still doing the same hiring process that they were doing 20 years ago, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. And one of the things we do with ours is, is we fine tune it every time we hire somebody. And we found that, the 4-step works for us, and it's not, we've yet to have anybody back out because of timing, and we work very hard to make it very quick. It's not, it's pretty much a thing where we set it up, and, most of the time, within about 3 weeks or so, we have gone through all 4 steps, and I've offered the job. Yeah. And so, because as soon as the deadline happens, it's generally a Friday at 5. man, we're all sitting around the table going like, okay, it's 5, let's go. And probably that, before the night's over, we've already got who's going to keep going to the next round before that night's even over. And
Yeah.
but that's a good point and so I think that's a great point you make is that we've got to make the process give us the information we need and not be wasteful of money, of time, and things to that nature. And because I'm not saying that our 4-step process will work for anybody else in the world. It
Right.
may not, but it works for us. And it
Yeah.
gives us, because what we always say is we're trying to make sure that when we go through the process, that the person we hire, we get what we thought we'd get with it. Okay, we know this person is newer, has less experience, but is really energetic. Well, 6 months later, that's what I want to know. I want to know that's what we got. It doesn't have to be that we got, the Clint Eastwoods of, or the Chuck Norris of this type of work. We got who we thought we were going to get, because then we can build them up. But there's a lot of waste of money and time, and we don't have that.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I love what you said about having your daughter in the process and talking to the people, because I've been a part of processes where, they had, maybe a city clerk who has nothing to do with the fire department, but that person is sitting out in the lobby like they're an applicant. And and again, I'm probably going to waste secrets I shouldn't give away, because now people are going to go into hiring processes and be super freaking paranoid. But that person had a problem. Maybe they got a stain on their shirt, or maybe they had, they open up their binder and all their paperwork falls on the floor, right? They're looking for the people that are going to sit there and help that person put their binder back together. And they're going to pick up their paperwork, or sit there and say, hey, I have a bleach pen. You can borrow this if you want to go clean that stain off your shirt, or whatever it is, right? And so I was blown away by that. And I sat there the first time I saw it and I went, hey, isn't that the clerk? And they're like, yeah. And I said, why is she here? And I was like, is she applying for the fire department? They're like, no, she's actually a role player. We're going to put her in the lobby. And so every time somebody comes in, they don't know that person isn't applying for the job. All they know is there's somebody else sitting in the waiting room with them. And so it's a great way. And then even better than that, I actually saw, it was a division chief of a department. He was sitting in there. And the only reason why I knew who he was is because I had met him before. But other applicants that were coming in from not that area, he said, hey, listen, we've had an issue in the past with people that apply from outside our jurisdiction. So maybe a different state, maybe on the other side of the state, people that wouldn't know necessarily anything about that department. He sat in there, and when people came in and they said, you're the deputy chief, aren't you? He goes, okay, they've looked into our department. They've looked into our staff. They know who we are. That's a plus, right? For the people that didn't, he would sit there and be a role player, and he would sit there and, maybe he'd say, man, I'm really nervous. What do you think? Are you nervous? Well, I'm not nervous because I know I'm probably going to get this job. Oh, really? Oh, really? And so again, it's one of those things where that could be a step that is, I guarantee you, that is way better than any lie detector or
Yeah.
any psych eval.
Because you're not. I mean, it's doing more unethical things are doing when nobody's watching you.
Right.
And like you said, with notice that the last full-time employee I hired, he come in and he could tell me about exercises we've done, what social media we used. I mean, and they're off camera, they're off record, so they act, in the way that they would act normally, and that's especially when we're client driven. On target preparedness, fire service, we're client driven, and as a result, if you can't treat people nicely when you're not being watched, then we don't need you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think a lot of it goes back to what we were kind of talking about before. What people are looking at for the fire service career right now is not what we looked at when we came into the fire service. And I will honestly say, I've been in the fire service long enough. I'm in a position now with a couple of the departments where I'm in that middle management level position. I have to remind myself that, hey, listen, the drive that made me join the fire department is not the drive that a lot of the people that are coming in now have. They're motivated by money. They're motivated by a constant place to work. They're motivated by insurance. I mean, if you would have told me 20 years ago that a 20-year-old kid would sit there and debate whether he was going to take job A or job B, and this just happened. This just happened to a guy that was on my department as a volunteer. He came to us on a shift and he goes, "Hey guys, I got a question. I'm trying to decide. I got 2 job offers from 2 career departments. Which one should I take?" And I said, "Well, which one do you want to take?" He goes, "I don't know, man. I was looking at the insurance benefits from this one and they're way better than this one, but this one has better training opportunities." And I'm like, "Bro, you're 20. You still live at home with your mom."
Yeah.
Right? But that's what they're worried about.
Yep.
I didn't worry about that kind of crap when I was getting hired. I was like, "Oh, cool. You got cooler fire trucks in this department? Cool. I'll go to this one."
Right. Yeah. I mean, and again, that's the mindset change that the society has done, but we haven't changed our organizations for, and, that's why I think that as, especially on the career side, we need to let, our applicants know all that stuff. It's like, hey, look, this is what you're going to get when you come to work for us. This is your insurance. This is your this, because we don't need to wait to the last minute and then realize, hey, now we're going to give you this information of benefits and stuff. And you're like, well, I can't do that. I've got to have this because I've got a special needs son or something, and we can't afford it if it's not to this level or something. You're wasting time. And, we've got to do those kind of things and finding those people and what they're, I mean, it goes back to, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you and I got into the service, it was because we just were passionate about the job. Somebody or something made us passionate about the job. And we looked at, who had the coolest fire trucks, the coolest fire helmets. I remember when, I was deciding between 2 departments, and one sit there and they just gone to start wearing the Carnes 1010s, and we're like, oh crap, but this one's only got salad bowls and and things like that.
So, it's so true, man. It's so true.
But that's not what they look at anymore. They look at it, and in one way they're getting smart about it because they're looking at it from a whole job perspective.
Yeah.
And and so one of the things that we're hitting on that's so important for me is the idea that they know what they're getting into in terms of salary, in terms of benefits, in terms of the job. I remember, and I cannot for the life of me remember who it was that told me, but it was an officer at a decent sized department. And they had a new recruit that just finished rookie school, just finished academy, and came on shift. And morning went great, went throughout the day. Well, about 5 o'clock, they noticed, he's getting close to 5 o'clock. They noticed that the turnout gear that was beside the truck for the rookie was gone. Mm-hmm. They were like, what in the world? They started looking around at it, and he put his gear into the locker. And they're like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm going home. It's 5 o'clock. And they're like, no, buddy, we work 24-hour shifts. That is a waste of time, again, of time, money, and effort, because he may say, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I can do that. That's even better. Or he may say, no, I'm out. Well, how much time did we just lose in the academy because of that?
Well, and so, oh my God. Yes. Everything yes about that. So I'll go one step further. I feel like, and I've heard this from other people, and I've experienced this. I know you have too, because we've talked about it in the past. If you bring somebody in and you sell your department as a certain type of department, whether it's aggressive, whether it's training oriented, whether it's citizen oriented, whether it's personnel oriented, if you sell your department like that and they come in and realize that you're full of shit and you have not done a single thing that you told them that you were about, and I'll give you the perfect example. We had a guy that was super motivated about being a part of the community and helping the community. And, they told him what he wanted to hear because they needed somebody really bad, right? And so they said, he was a paramedic. He was very knowledgeable. He had a bunch of fire certs. They said, yeah, we're all about the citizens. We're all about the populace, and we want to do what's right for our citizens. And anything that you do that's right for the citizens, we'll back you up. Well, fast forward about a year later, and he got in trouble for doing something for a citizen that was against policy, right? And I can talk about it because I don't work for the department anymore. But he gave a ride to a citizen to get them to a gas station so that they could fill up with fuel and bring them back to their vehicle on the side of the interstate, and didn't ask for permission. Right now, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not a chief, and there's probably a reason for that. But if a guy came to me and said, "Hey, I just gave Joe Q Public a ride to the gas station and got him a can of gas and brought him back to his car so that he could get home to his family," I don't see the problem in that,
Right.
right? But in one fell swoop, they showed him that they didn't care about the public, they didn't care about him, and they weren't what they said they were. And it was like a week after that, he started applying for jobs, and about 3 weeks after that, he left.
Yeah, and
So,
we don't look at the cost of that,
right,
because we look at it as, okay, somebody quit, and that's about where we stop. But we got to look at it. How much time and investment have we put into him? Whether we put him through an academy, even if it's a short academy, and then we're sitting there and we're still doing continuing education and sending them to extra schools and these kind of things, and then they quit. Well, now we're short somebody. Now we're having to pay overtime to fill that position. Then we've got to sit there and do another hiring process, which costs time and money because people that are in the process have to be out and doing these kind of things. Then we still have to get the person we hired to a trained level to get on the rig to respond. And that's extremely costly.
yeah,
So I think that's a huge failure of ours if we do sell it like that. I mean, and that's why I'm a big fan of, you've seen a lot of departments do it now, or not a lot, but some, where they have like open houses before the application process.
yep,
And I would highly encourage them to have, to off record, just honest, just bring some members in and say, hey, your job is just to talk openly with them. Don't feed them no lines. If they sit there and ask, well, what, are you aggressive? And we're like, well, we can be. Then don't
right,
tell them you are aggressive. Tell them, yeah, in the right circumstances, in the right situations, just like with my department. I mean, we're a combination department. We've got 3 full-timers and a handful of part-timers and a bunch of volunteers. We do EMS transport. We do EMS. We probably do 2/3 of our calls are EMS. Now, we run a good amount of fire calls too, but, and that's not something we hide. It's like, look, we run a bunch of EMS calls. You will have shifts on the ambulance,
yeah,
but you're going to have shifts on the truck, and you're going to ride the rigs, and, you're going to be taught and trained through our process to drive them and all of that. But, that waste, I mean, if you're not calculating how much money you just wasted time on that, and because of that, then you're sadly missing out, because you just cost yourself and your department a lot. And
yeah,
it goes back into the grants. You're saying, well, we don't have enough money. Well, where are you wasting money at? Well,
right.
to be like one of those places.
Well, and so Dennis Riley, right, Chief Riley, down in Pittsburgh, Kansas. I love telling this story because whenever I get into discussions about this, I always use him as a reference, right? And so it was so funny because he put up a YouTube video, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago. They had a couple openings, and he said, I'm having a hard time getting applicants. So he had one of his firefighters, the kid that knows how to use Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff, sat there with the phone and videotaped him, and they put it up on social media. But he sits there and he says, hey, if you're looking for a department that has aggressive search culture and you want to put the citizens first, come work for us. And, he said a lot more than that. But I mean, and he lives, eats, and breathes that stuff. It's not like he's, lip service. He sat there and put that video up, and he said, we had more applicants for that hiring process than we've had in a long time. And so you have this smaller department that's kind of surrounded by volunteer and the closest department is like 20, 30 miles away that is the same size. They were always the department that was losing people. And now they're the department where people want to come work for them. And so, yeah, it's totally all about how you do it. And the one thing, I'm going to go way back to what you said in the very beginning of this. You talked about exit interviews. And I want to tell you right now, the common denominator right now, and this is just my opinion, is that the city management, the administrations of the fire departments right now, they don't want to listen to exit interviews. They don't care what you say. If you walk in there and say, I'm leaving because I'm not making enough money, they say, well, we don't have enough money because of COVID or because of whatever. If you say it's a toxic culture, they say, no, it's not. I just had a fire chief tell me 3 months ago. I had a fire chief tell me to my face during a conversation that I was having at dinner. It was a group of us, and there was a couple chiefs. He goes, I don't think this paramedic thing is shortage is real. There's no paramedic shortage. The people that can't recruit right are saying that there's a paramedic shortage. I'm like, are you out of your mind? If you honestly think that there's not a paramedic shortage right now, you're out of your mind. There are less paramedics coming out of paramedic programs right now than ever before in the history of ever. And but he won't accept that.
Well, and and I can tell you, my department. So Campbell University has the newest med school in North Carolina. It's probably about 7-8 years old, and you'll be amazed at the number of people that will come to Campbell. They join our department as some level of EMT, and the whole purpose is to go through that process. And most of the time they'll go EMT, they'll become paramedic, and then the next thing you know, they're in med school, they're in PA school there, and it was a stepping stone because EMS has virtually no stepping stones. It's you may become a shift supervisor or something, but there's not much, and there's so many, because we've had a shift in our belief systems. We're taking a lot more punches to the gut, in my opinion, as paramedics, because as on EMS calls, I've been shot at, I've had knives pulled on me, I've been hit and everything else, and exposed to every kind of bodily fluid you can imagine, and we get paid chump change. We're not considered medical professionals, even though we're, in my opinion, a equal counterpart to nurses, to registered nurses and things like that. But I think it goes back to, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Jason Hogelman, chief, that, said something to the effect, and I'm definitely paraphrasing, but, just because we don't accept something doesn't mean it's not real. And we've got to sit there and just, data doesn't lie. I mean, and that's why, like with my company, I don't do the exit interviews. My executive assistant handles it. I tell the employee that's leaving, I said, I want you to, Lisa's going to call you, my executive assistant, and, she's going to go through the exit interview with you. And I want you to be 100% honest. I can't retaliate against you. You've already got another job and this, that, and the other, and I would never do that in the first place.
Right.
And I want you to be candid. And that's why I'm not there. And, and I generally wait about a week, maybe 2 weeks after they're gone. And then Lisa and I'll sit down about it. We'll look at what notes she took. And because at the same time, there's a right way to do an exit interview. I mean, generally people are not confrontational. They're not going to come up to you and go like, hey, Dave, you know what? Your podcast stinks. I don't like it. This, that. We generally don't.
I've heard that a couple times, but okay.
Okay. Well, everybody can be wrong one time in their life. I guess that was when theirs were. But they're not going to basically, in general, tell you what their real feelings are about something. If you're the one that controls, you would never go into a chief and say, hey, I think you're running this department horribly wrong. Right. And so I don't want that. It's not getting me anything for them to sit in front of my face and tell me something that's a lie. But if they sit down with Lisa and they say, this is the way I feel. This is what, and we ask questions. Everything was, did what we tell you before you applied, was that adequate and accurate to what your job was?
Right.
Well, yes, it was. Okay. Did you feel like you were empowered and trained to do your job? Well, yes, I do. Okay. What is the reason that you started looking for another job? And the way I've always looked at it is that there's going to be employees that leave that you can't do anything with. I have she's a colleague of mine. She works for a county government now, and she had to leave because the fact that her and her now husband created their own side business doing something else. And she needed to be there closer to him on the weekends, which working for me didn't allow her to do. I can't do anything about that, But what we did is we had a good follow-up conversation of respect that said, hey, I appreciate you telling us the truth. I appreciate what you're doing. I'm sorry that you have to go. Just know you're always part of our team. You call on us for anything. Since then, she's used our company probably 6 times in the last 3.5 years, and it's because of the fact that there was in my opinion, because there was a proper exit interview with proper follow-up, to go through it. And there's going to be times where they're going to roast you. And you have to look into it with an open heart and open mind to go, is this justified?
Right.
And, when, we don't have a lot of turnover with our full-timers, so it's kind of hard. But when you sit there and looking at, bigger departments, like you said, 500-600 people, and you're regular looking people, there's trends in that data.
Yeah.
You just
absolutely.
got to take time to look at it and be open that if it says, hey, we're sitting there and get told 46% of the time that we have a toxic culture because all the battalion chiefs are micromanagers and are rude. Yeah, that's something we need to look at. Again, not saying we're going to start calling all of our battalion chiefs in and punishing them at fire, but we need to look into it and spend some time doing it and seeing, because it could be a misunderstanding.
Oh, absolutely. So there's, it's so funny that you said. So I have two friends that just got hired at a career department, and they went through the academy. They went through they went through the hiring process together. They went through the academy together, and then they split and went to 2 different stations. One guy loves it, absolutely loves his crew. He's like, man, we hang out, we train together, we eat together, we talk, have pillow talk before we go to bed. Whatever it is, man, he is all about it. He loves his shift. The other guy wants to drive into a bridge abutment. He was told that he couldn't come into the family room with the crews. He was told that he couldn't be a part of any kind of social activities with the crews. He's got to study by himself. He gets task upon task upon task upon task, to the point where when he's done with the task and he goes to study, which is what he's supposed to do, he'll be given another task by another firefighter. And it puts him in a predicament because, he was just told by the captain to go do something. Now this firefighter's telling him to go wash the trucks. It's putting him in a position where he's going to fail. And he's getting to the point now where he's so frustrated with it. He's like, man, I'm starting to look for another job. And it's so vastly different. Well, as it turns out, I talked to a couple other people that have been with that same crew, and they all had the same problem. So you have a department with 18 stations, and this same crew is doing the same thing to all their new recruits. How has nobody figured this out yet? Right? So it's one of those things where, guys that are not involved in it, they're like, hey man, don't go to HR. That's just going to make your life worse. Well, that puts him in an even worse spot. How is it going to get better if he doesn't go to HR? Because he can't stand up for himself, right? Because the second that he does, that's just going to make his life miserable. And so, it's one of those weird dynamic things, man. And he comes to us for support, and we're trying to give it to him. But, dude, it's getting to the point now where he's like, I'm actively applying at other departments, and he's only been with this department for 2 months.
Yeah, and that is so sad, because who knows what his. Because this is another part of recruitment and retention that I always like to mention is we don't know what kind of future firefighter he's going to be.
Right.
He may be the next person that can sit there and, you got a technical rescue, he just blinks and it's handled. He's that awesome. And, we don't take that into consideration. And I think, with going with that mindset, I think that we've got to sit there and do better with this whole, rookie kind of situation. When you and I were rookies, we had the passion so much that we would take that because that was what it meant for us. It was a badge of honor to do it. And we enjoyed it. But as we were talking earlier, that people's values and belief systems and needs have changed, we're going to turn people more away, from doing that. And, whether it's, my fire department or my company, I've got a pretty much, and it's big for my for my company, but we have like a kind of a settling in period before you're kind of like a little bit more fair game in terms of being picked on or given certain, unwanted tasks to be able to do and things like that, because we want you to become part of the family first. And I think that this next generation that's coming into us, they want to know that we're taking them under their wing. And I think we need to go and change some to where, yes, there's still things they need to be doing. I mean, if there's things that needs to be done, the rookie needs to be out there doing them, and such. But they've got to be put in a position of the opportunity for success, as well as being put in a situation where, there is enough, I don't want to call it hazing, but enough of the, ragging, if you will, that they become part of the family.
Right.
But when the ways that we used to do it, I mean, I laugh at my department now, that I'm on now, been on and off for many years. I think I've about 15 years total service to them now. But the way we did it in 97 when I was first on there versus the way it is now, if we would ask the same way, we wouldn't have anybody in our fire department. I mean, I think we've got about 45, 50 volunteers right now. And I can tell you that number will be gone if we acted the same way. And now it's kind of the same situation is that, the fire department's like, okay, we're going to tread lightly. And then as you become part of the family and stuff like that, and we comfortable with you and we can tell you're comfortable with us, we're going to rag you some, But we are more focused on, can we make you the best of the best? And we have to help them with that. Whereas before, it was our passion of doing the job alone that's what got us there. And it's changed.
Well, and so one of the things that I've done in the past, which again, you can call it hazing, you can call it whatever you want, right? But what I've done in the past is I will have my wife or my mom or my sister or somebody, right? And it got a little tricky when they started getting the caller IDs on the phone where it would actually show, because most of the cities didn't have that in the beginning, right?
Right.
But when I first became a company officer, one of the things that I would do with my crews is I would sit there and have somebody that was close to me call the fire station and act like an irate citizen. And they're, mother effering, they're doing whatever they can to get that guy riled up or that gal riled up. Okay. And I wanted to see how they were going to act, right? Because I can sit there and tell them, like, hey, when you answer the phone, you introduce yourself, hey, XYZ Fire Department, this is Firefighter Mellon, how can I help you? Okay. That's one part of it, but how are they going to handle that? And so, I'd have my wife call and she's screaming and yelling about how a fire truck cut them off and you mother effers almost hit my car and I pay your salaries and blah, blah, blah. And it's never asking a question. I told my wife, I said, do not ask for a chief. Do not ask for a captain. Just call and start complaining. And so I knew it was coming, right? Like I'm sitting back and I'm in the office and I'm listening to this phone call and the new person's like, and you had two types of people. The ones that would sit there and take it and they would say, ma'am, I am so sorry. Let me get your information. I'm going to pass it along, or please hold. Let me get you in contact with our captain. And then you had the other ones that were, I had people hang up on my wife. I had people yell back at my wife. And I'm like, bro, you can't do that. Right. So that to me is a form of, you could call that kind of, busting their balls or busting their chops. Yeah. Because you're setting them up. You know what's going on. They don't.
And it's also a good learning experience.
Absolutely. And it's great for me to see where they're at with their head, because they're never going to forget that. Every time the phone rings, they're going to be like, ooh, is this a setup or is this for real? Yep. And so, great example. We had a lady call the fire station when I first started at my career department. We had a lady call the fire station and she was crying. She was hysterical. And she said that somebody had stolen her dog. And I said, okay. I said, and that's not my problem, right? Yeah, I mean, as a firefighter, that's not my job. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, ma'am, hold on a second. Let me get your information. This is more of a law enforcement thing. And she's like, I don't want the cops here. I called the fire department because that's what you need to do. I pay your salary. You need to go find my dog. And I'm like, all right, ma'am, I'm going to take your information. I'm going to get you in contact with my captain. I'll transfer you to him. And as soon as I walked into his office, I said, hey, Cap, there's a lady on the phone about her dog that got stolen. He goes, oh, God. I go, oh, God, what? He goes, that's the crazy lady that lives down the street. She calls every couple of weeks and says that somebody stole her dog. The cops had told her that they weren't going to deal with it anymore. So now she calls us because she wants. I said, is there a dog? He goes, she hadn't had a dog for like 20 years. She's just batshit crazy.
Right.
And so, we didn't go out and actively look for her dog. He got on the phone and he explained to her, hey, Do you remember me? Yes. Do you remember that we looked for your dog a couple weeks ago? We didn't find it. We put up posters, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, so he handled it appropriately. But, man, that lady, I could have been like, ma'am, that's not our problem. You need to call the police department. Click.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens all the time in this country every day.
Yeah. I mean, and, and it's such a vital thing to know about people because, when we pull up on scene and, you got to, I'm just going back to a call I had where, I had a mom who was losing her mind because her 3-year-old wasn't breathing because he, was playing in the pool and wasn't being watched. And, and she's hysterical and going out of her mind. I've got a patient I've got to deal with. So if I'm not situated and in the right mindset, that patient's not got a good chance because I don't know, I'm going to just lose my stuff. And so we've got, so that's, something that we've got to constantly work on. And it's, and it goes back to the first thing we were talking about, is the issue of, training's got to be realistic. Your wife calling is not going to sit there and be the end of the world to somebody. It's not going to, but it's realistic. And like you said, it's going to always, and that's the thing we've got to remember, every day is how no matter what we do, we're going to be remembered for something. And one of the things, I use this story and hope he won't kill me for it, but I got a good buddy of mine who's an officer with DC Fire Department. And the way that he and I connected was the fact that I was up in DC. I was asked to be part of a group that looked into the National Improvised Explosive Device planning and preparedness for the United States. And of course, what do we do when we sit there and, go to a city or something? We're going to go walk in and find stuff. And I said, well, I'll just walk around and see if I find a fire station. Found one, knocked on the door. This buddy of mine, now buddy of mine comes to the door. Hey, can I help you? I'm like, yeah, I'm from North Carolina, it was after I was like 6:30. And I'm like, if it wouldn't be a problem, would you have time for, a quick tour, maybe just show me your rig and what all you got on it and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, sure, come in. Well, long story short, they, we all hit it off, the whole crew and I hit it off. And it came dinner time. And I was like, look, thank y'all. I'm going to get out your hair. And they look pretty much like, sit down, you're eating with us. And I'm like, no, this is not right. This is your house. You were nice enough to me to come in and, unannounced and ask for something that y'all gave me, and you've given me more than that. And ended up staying because they just wouldn't take no for an answer.
Right.
And I said, all right, well, here, I'm chipping in. What's the binding? And they're like, no, you're a guest. You're not mine. I'm like, doggone it. You got to work with me on this. This is not right. I know I'm a guest, but I don't care. Right. They wouldn't. And so I finally said, all right, this, I'm not going down without, swinging on the third strike. So, it got to that point where it's time to clean up. And so I just sat there and started cleaning up. And I saw the list of duties that they did. And, I started doing everything. And it got to the point of taking out trash. And so I went around, got all the trash, went up to the captain's office. And he said, can I help you? What are you doing, David? And I'm saying, well, sir, I ate. It's time to help out and clean the station, the firehouse. It's all one for all. And I gathered the trash and took the trash out, and, I became close friends with my buddy, of course, but I'm still told that captain still remembers me because of the fact that it was like, hey, this dude did not have to do anything right. that he did, but he made an impact. And that's what we have to remember. And, and even when it's that crazy old lady down the street, we still got to take care of her in a way that's very finesse and nice. And that doesn't mean that every time she calls, we go out there and look for, her puppy. We had a person about 5 years, 6 years ago at my department that after her becoming somebody who called the fire department, called 911 a lot, we started realizing she was lonely. Right. So what happened is about once a week, a couple of us would go to the station, get ready. We would just walk behind the station, go to her place, sit down. We take her blood pressure and, no one, that was our excuse to get it. It's like, let's take your blood pressure. And then we just sat down and talked with them. And guess what? 911 call stopped,
Yep.
And it was just, take care. So it's, we've got to remember, that impact. And so knowing what our people do in those situations is very important. And, I mean, especially with the fact that we have so many, we could go down a huge rabbit hole in this one, but there's so much mental health issues, in the world and stuff like that. Doesn't mean that person hangs up on your wife or somebody's necessarily, mean or rude. It just be the only way they know how to handle a situation, get out of it. So then we work through that and we find out, okay, this is not, you can't take this very well because of X, Y, and Z to happen, but again, if we know something, we know our limitation, then we can address it and we can sit there and make adjustments for it, for that. And I always compare that to, we always like to do a 360 around the structure when we're in command and going to make sure that we know everything. Well, what happens if the backyard's fenced in and there's like 4 bulldogs, 2 Dobermans, right, and stuff like that. I don't care how friendly they are. I'm going to be very hesitant to go by that. But you know what I can say is I have limited knowledge of what that back looks like. Yep. And I can admit it. I can let other people know about it. And then I can find alternate strategies to handle it where it may be, hey, look, we're going to set the tower ladder up in a really weird situation just so we can try to see back there, or maybe it's getting a homeowner. But being able to admit our limitations first is which we can't do very well because we're too macho about it. And, right, and I think it's just the opposite, being able to admit our limitations and then trying to build on it. That's the strongest, most powerful you can be.
Oh, absolutely. So we're at the 1.5 hour mark. So I want to take a second and give everybody the opportunity. We hit so many, like you're another one that we're going to have part 2. I love it. And this is cool. I mean, I love, you and I have always had these kind of conversations over Facebook or social media or things like that. And so to be able to sit down and actually have the conversation, dude, you're so spot on a lot of things. You're one of the few people that has gotten me riled up, right? Like I can see it in my face on the screen. I'm like, I'm turning red. I got to change the settings. But no, it's, I love a lot of the stuff that you said. So how can people get a hold of you?
Oh, absolutely. So, they can find me personally on social media, David Hesselmeyer, on Facebook, Twitter, it's at D Hesselmeyer. My email address is dhesselmeyer@ontargetprep.com. Another way they can learn a lot through things that On Target Preparedness does is go check out On Target Preparedness on Facebook and LinkedIn. We're always trying to put out information about tips and tricks for everything, how to make that exercise more realistic or how to, fine tune your grant or something to that effect. So, we're more than, willing to, the more we're all better prepared and everything, I love it. And so, I recommend anybody who wants to reach out to me, don't hesitate. It's one of the things that I put out through social media when I go to FDIC in places and I tell, my students that come to my sessions is don't be afraid to stop. And I'm just a person that just has some passion in what I do. And, if you stop me and I've got time, we're going to talk. If we don't, then maybe we'll grab dinner that night or something, because, we're all in this together. So I highly encourage people, don't hesitate to reach out.
No, I love it, man. So, David, you are a gentleman and a scholar. I appreciate you being on. We'll have to have you back on as a guest host. But until the next time you and I talk, take care, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Same thing, brother. Appreciate it.